Okay, let's talk about a really high-stakes debate happening in Japan. And it all starts with a pretty terrifying thought. What if a country's capital city, the absolute heart of its government and economy, was just gone in an instant? I'm not talking about a movie plot here. This is a very real fear, and it's driving this huge national conversation about how to build a country that can actually survive the unthinkable.
So what if Tokyo, one of the biggest megacities on the planet, just stopped working? Now, this isn't just some hypothetical question. It's the critical question that's forcing Japan's leaders to face a really scary vulnerability. Think about it. A single disaster hitting Tokyo could literally paralyze the entire nation. And you can bet that possibility is being taken very, very seriously. So, here's the core of the problem. It's this dangerous level of over-concentration. I mean, Japan has basically put all its eggs in one basket. So much of its government, its finance, its population, it's all packed into Tokyo. This has created a massive single point of failure. If one big thing goes wrong there, it's not just that the government can't respond, we're talking about severe economic shockwaves rippling out, and it would just make the stagnation in other parts of the country even worse.
Right, so how do you solve a problem like this? How do you protect a country from its own geography? Well, a solution has been put on the table, and it is a bold one and definitely a controversial one. The idea is to build a complete national backup.
And we're not just talking about moving a few government offices around. No, this idea is way bigger than that. It's a plan to legally set up a completely parallel system. Think of it like a functional clone of the nation's control center. The whole point is to make sure the country can keep running literally no matter what happens to Tokyo.
Now, for the people who support this plan, it's about way more than just preparing for a disaster. They see this as a chance to hit three birds with one stone. First, you get to fix that extreme and frankly dangerous over-concentration in Tokyo. Second, you start shifting Japan towards a more decentralized, multipolar country. And third, of course, you get that super robust backup system for all the capital's functions if the worst should happen.
But a plan this huge, this ambitious, it was never going to be simple. It was absolutely bound to create conflict. And this is really where the debate catches fire. It pits the very real need for a national safety net against some just immense financial risks. And that brings us to the first major clash of ideas here.
Okay, so on the one hand, you've got the supporters. They're basically saying that having a physical, parallel capital is the only foolproof insurance policy you can have. Their argument is pretty straightforward. In a real, major disaster, what's the first thing to go? Communication networks. And since those networks are the backbone of any digital alternative, you just can't rely on them. So for these guys, a physical backup isn't just a good idea, it's the only way to guarantee the nation survives.
But, of course, the critics jump right in and poke a huge hole in that logic. They say, hold on a second, aren't you just creating a second, really obvious target? I mean, think about a worst-case scenario, something like the massive Nankai Trough earthquake everyone fears. That could potentially hit both Tokyo and the proposed deputy capital, say in Osaka. And if that happens, well, your incredibly expensive backup plan becomes completely useless. And that really brings us to the elephant in the room, the biggest point of conflict, the one thing that hangs over this entire debate, the absolutely staggering cost.
So this really is the trillion-yen question, isn't it? On one side, the proponents frame this huge price tag as a totally rational investment. They say, look, it's just an insurance premium, and it's a tiny fraction of what we'd lose if a disaster actually leveled Tokyo. But then you have the opponents. They see a completely reckless gamble that would suck money away from other critical needs, like Social Security. They're worried it could end up as a massive, underused white elephant, just a giant, empty monument to bad planning.
Now, it's important to note that the people against this deputy capital plan, they're not just saying no and walking away. They actually have a completely different idea, a much more tech-focused path forward. And that leads us to our second big clash.
Their vision for the future relies a lot less on concrete and a whole lot more on the cloud. The idea is to have a much more flexible, a more decentralized, and a potentially much cheaper way to make the country resilient, all built on a solid foundation of digital infrastructure.
So what they're proposing is something called the multi-point dispersion model. The philosophy behind it is actually pretty simple. Instead of building one giant backup, why not create a distributed network that's almost impossible to take down with a single hit? It's really about making the government location independent. You do that by beefing up the national tech infrastructure, spreading critical data out to servers all over the country, and really empowering remote work systems. And finally, you strengthen and distribute government functions to the regional hubs that already exist.
So when you put it all together, Japan is really at a fundamental crossroads. This has gone way beyond just disaster planning. This is now a choice between two completely, profoundly different visions for what the nation's future should look like.
And it really does boil down to the strategic choice. You've got Vision A, the deputy capital. That's the big, centralized physical backup. Think of it as a fortress. Then you've got Vision B, the digital dispersion. That's the decentralized, digital approach, more like a flexible web. Both have some pretty clear benefits, right? One gives you robust redundancy, the other is cheaper and more flexible. But here's the kicker. Both of them carry a massive and pretty much inescapable risk.
So why does all this matter? Well, because the path Japan chooses here is going to define its entire approach to risk, to technology, and even to its national identity for decades to come. This is one of those debates that forces a country to ask itself a fundamental question. Does our greatest strength lie in building these giant concrete monuments of resilience? Or is it in creating a network so widespread, so diffuse, that it can never truly be broken?